Well, hello, everybody. My name is Michael McCormick, and you are listening to the Superintendent Hot Seat, where bold superintendent leaders share the real stories behind their most difficult challenges and decisions as they work to improve student safety, wellness, and attendance in a system not yet fully prepared to support those students entering our schools. Today's guest is Adam Clark, Superintendent of the Mount Diablo Unified School District. Adam, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to spend the next little bit of time with you and talk about my favorite topic, which is students and how we support students and all the wonderful things that we do to unlock all of their talents and gifts. And so thank you very much for having me as a guest.
Absolutely. So here's the big question. If you had to rethink student wellness in your district, and I think you've done a bit of that, whether it's student anxiety, depression, bullying, or violence, how have you approached this work?
Yeah, so it's kind of a simple concept. Is we want our students to learn. We have programs and staff and materials and all these things to support students. But if students don't feel connected, don't feel safe, don't feel good about themselves, then it's going to be very difficult for them to buy what we're selling, which is instruction. And so really putting our students at the forefront is how I would want to address all of the things that we're doing in our district. And you know, when you look at student wellness, I think you look at students' sort of physical safety, you look at how they perceive themselves, and then you look at relationships that they have with others. And kind of looking at those three buckets, I think really helps us get a good understanding of how best to support our students.
Yeah, we want to have students have a sense of belonging, right? When they feel connected to school, you know, it's interesting. I mean, I was kind of looking at your job history there. You've been an elementary school principal, a middle school principal, and a high school principal. So I think you have to come at this work with kind of a really wide peripheral vision. In other words, you've had the experience of sitting in those seats. And elementary, middle, and high school, I started off as an elementary school teacher and then got sucked into secondary education and wound up being a middle school and high school principal myself. And there are differences in terms of culture from an elementary school to a middle school to a high school. Yeah. And so what are some of the things that you're excited about in Mount Diablo? And maybe kind of take us through that, those grade spans, things that you might be doing at elementary school, middle school, and high school to really get students plugged into school.
Yeah, so that's a great question. You know, I've had the luxury and the benefit to work with all three levels, elementary, middle, and high. I started off in middle and kind of worked my way up with high school being the last one, kind of the pinnacle, right? That's our finished product. As we get these students when they're, 4 or 5 years old and as they exit our system, as an 18-year-old or, for some as a 22-year-old students who leave our bridge programs, but really is to not approach it with a one size fits all. And unfortunately, sometimes in public education, we tend to implement this sort of top-down mentality as it comes to educating our students instead of really building our students up. So understanding the developmental levels of our students to understand how they progress, how they progress throughout, the changes that they go through physically. So what a kindergartner needs is going to be a lot different than what a fifth grader needs, even though they're on the same campus. Usually how we support those educators who are supporting those folks, they have a different mindset, right? A kindergarten teacher to a fifth grade teacher has a different mindset. And one of the benefits of coming from that environment is knowing how to support those folks, right? And knowing how to allow them to not only work on the academic progress of those students, but to work on the social, emotional, and developmental process that it takes. And then as you go through middle school, the same thing applies. A sixth grader is very different than an eighth grader, and the approach has to be different. Middle school is kind of like where it all starts to happen. And then there was a great framework some years back, and you probably remember this, but it was Caught in the Middle. And Caught in the Middle really looks at because a middle school, you're caught in the middle of elementary and high school. And even on that campus, with the sixth grade experience to the eighth grade experience can be, again, very, very different. And so trying to implement a one size fits all just is not going to work at a middle school. At a middle school, you have those emotions really going through the roof with our students. So you have to provide extra support to be able to support their transition. Relationships are huge for middle school students, right? And the whole thing of fitting in, getting involved, being a part of something. That is like not the time to call out students or put them in the limelight or to, expect them to really have command of their voice and of their sort of place on the campus. It's really a time to help them understand all that's out there so that they can make wise choices. And then when you get to a high school campus, knowing the difference between freshman and senior, right? Again, very different place. And so how do you structurally try to create systems that actually meet kids where they are, but also with that vision of where we're trying to take them through our schooling and through our educational process. I hope that kind of makes some sense.
Yeah, no, you did. You did. Yeah, it's great. And so are there some things, let's start with middle school. Are there some things that the district has committed to in terms of getting students to find their place and feel connected? For example, Mount Diablo, do you have a middle school sports program? Do you have band on campus? Do you have other electives and activities that kids are getting involved in to experience that sense of belonging on their middle school campuses? And then if there's some wellness supports that you have, for example, do you have wellness centers? Is that something that the district has committed to, or those safe spaces? So I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah. So absolutely all the above. So, we don't necessarily have a formal, athletic program for our middle schools. We run it through our after school programs. So through our cares and just, I want to talk about that a little bit is one reason why I pushed back on establishing middle school athletics is because oftentimes the goal would be to give those latchkey kids, a place to go after school and organized activity, things like that. But unfortunately, what happens is oftentimes with our competitiveness in sports, you have kids who play club teams who then that same club team will now sort of take over the middle school team. And then you have to up the coaching, right? And usually we just have a volunteer teacher who wants to go out there and coach and provide a safe space. Now they're being required to implement the club things there on the sports, but sports are so important. So then what I recommend to our schools and to our parents who want to see these is let's create like a tournament type day or a sports like activity to do on a Saturday or to do after school where we can bring in all kinds of kids and have them play different sports and, keep the scores and do things, but do like a rotation thing so that people get to experience and kind of take out that competitive nature of, everyone fighting for a trophy, at least in middle school, right? Because to really meet the goals that we were talking about, you're not going to meet those in creating these competitive programs. So we do that through our after school programs. But yes, we have band. I love seeing our middle school students involved in band, but we also have these sort of elective wheels where students might get involved in wood shop or might start getting their hands on some of those CTE programs, some programming clubs or engineering clubs and things like that students can start doing those things. But really, the expectations that I set for my administrators is on a middle school campus, you need to be out interacting with students, going over to their groups during lunchtimes, talking to them, asking them questions, getting to see who's hanging out with who, and really understanding them so that you see the whole student, not just that student who may end up in your office when they're having an issue or something, so that you can speak, with knowledge about like what the student is facing on a day-to-day basis. We started off with wellness centers in our high schools, and now we've been moving them down and implementing them into our middle schools. And so that we're teaching students to advocate for themselves and to be able to go to a wellness center and saying, hey, I'm having difficulty with this certain situation I'm in. Can I get some support? And then having people meet them where they are and actually give them support, and not just, hey, where's your pass? Why are you out of class? This, that, and the other, but really teaching them some ways to be able to communicate, to be able to talk with a friend who they're having difficulty with, be able to share with their parents what they're experiencing at school or how certain things are impacting them, or getting them to talk with their teachers or the adults there on campus. And that may seem easy for us, but for a middle schooler, that is extremely difficult, for them to have that confidence to be able to really go out and advocate for themselves. So those are just some of the things, just scratching the surface, that we do to really push our middle schoolers to, start to explore as they're in this time of their educational lives, when they actually can explore CTE, explore some of those challenging math concepts, really get into reading and writing and things that way. But keeping that relationship focused always at the center of what it is that we're doing with our middle schoolers.
Yeah, I love that. I actually love that. And I've often said, the principalship is not a spectator sport. And the idea to get in and be with the kids and, have a little gravitas. That's how you get your street cred, is really having those interactions with kids and getting to see them beyond the walls of the classroom, so to speak. And I think some of those relationships can be very powerful in that way. You get to see kids for who they are, not just what they bring in terms of their academic capabilities. I often said when I was a high school principal, like, look, parents, the high school experience does not need to define your child for the rest of their life. Certainly, we know there's a whole lot of life beyond high school, right? Sounds like you may have had that similar conversation. No, that's a big deal. So yeah. I love your approach. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, as you get into high school, so many students kind of have this already set, kind of like their destination has already been decided for them. I'm going to this college. I'm going to play this sport. I'm going to be the first chair on the saxophone in the band. I'm no good at school, so I'm just here. I'm not going to graduate, right? And as students come in with some of these preconceived outcomes, it's up to us to let them know and open their eyes to all that's out there and to give them opportunities. And so as you have parents who are coming in and maybe over advocating for their students, to again, meet the parents where they are. And it's not time for, a lecture of the impacts that, putting too much pressure can have on students, but to really get to understand where that's coming from, and then to be able to articulate the actual process of the high school experience, of the academics. Yes, absolutely. Like everything we do is around academics, but the extracurricular helps gets the students excited and gets them tied to the academics. Like students don't get up in the morning and want to rush off for algebra, but they want to rush off to be with their colleagues in band or in a club or on a sports team or in drama and things like that, or in passing period, right? But then when they're doing those things, and if they're positive, always positive, then that's going to get them more available to be able to take in all of the opportunities that we have academically for them. Because, you've heard it a million times. Why do I have to learn this? Why do we have to do this? And helping students understand why they're learning certain things, or even how their schedule and courses build on one another to really develop those critical thinking skills that they have. But none of that happens if our students aren't feeling safe, if they aren't feeling accepted, if they don't have a tribe that supports them and accepts them and pushes them and holds them accountable. It's going to be very difficult, because students live so much in their heads during this time. They think, I wish I could be with that group, or I wish, that kid has all the answers, or, look how easy it is for her. And if when they get to know one another, like they understand, like everyone has those same challenges. Everyone doesn't know what it is that they're going to do after high school. Everyone, has growing pains that they're going through with their families or their siblings or their parents. Everyone has these relationships at school that, that they are trying to define or trying to better understand. And they just don't, because like their minds and their hormones and stuff are just these scattered beings at the time. So it's really nice to watch that progress, and to create environments where, hey, we're not just academics 24/7, but we're also not just fun and games 24/7, but where is that balance, and how can we help our students kind of balance that?
Yeah. I mean, just so much wisdom in what you said. And I always say there's no substitute for experience. And clearly you've had the experience, because it's so true. I mean, there's a really small percentage of students that show up to high school every day because they're competing for the valedictorian. And, that's a small group. And the other students are coming for a whole variety of reasons to get plugged in and experience that sense of belonging. And I also really love what you said, because, that little voice of doubt is also in my brain. It's that whole imposter syndrome thing crops up, and it's like to get students to understand that that's a human quality that we all have. And how do we kind of fight through that and say, no, I belong here. I'm meant to do this work. And so I love what you said. We're going to pause right here for a quick 30-second break for a message from our producer, Schoolbeat, which is the only SEL platform for both educators and students, and they truly love it. With low-lift Netflix style, choose your own adventure, lessons featuring real kids, navigating real-life challenges, daily wellness check-ins, and real-time insights into what students really feel. Schoolbeat is where every heart has a voice and every voice has a beat. Well, welcome back. We're here today with Adam Clark, Superintendent of the Mount Diablo Unified School District, right here in sunny Southern California. Adam, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about where you go to get your cup filled back. For those of you listening, superintendents, we probably have 1,000 interactions a day, and we're constantly, giving of ourselves. And where do you go to kind of recharge the batteries?
Yeah, I think it's sort of, I need to paint the whole picture. Is that I enter this work always grateful for the opportunity, grateful for the educators and the upbringing that I had, and I'm a very fortunate person. I met that fork in the road in my life many times to go down one path or another, and so I had people really help me along the way. And so as I enter into this work that is extremely stressful and extremely difficult and, can be very polarizing, I come with it with a very positive mindset, a growth mindset. And I see the beauty and the excellence in all of our students. And that's kind of how I approach each and every day. Unfortunately, in education, we see people who probably shouldn't be around young people. They're tired, they're very jaded, they're resistant to change, things like that, and so I combat that with positivity and with kind of just being very matter of fact to the opportunity that we have to shape young lives. So when I leave work or I leave, on the weekends or something, I'm not leaving something that is, as daunting as a daunting task. I'm just living the other part of my life. And of course, I have a wonderful family. I have three beautiful children, which has been sort of my purpose in life, was to raise these kids. They're grown now, right? They're out of the house and they have their own lives that they're living now. But giving service to others and primarily my kids and families, like that brings me tremendous joy. But I stay very active, I go through phases. So, either going to the gym or doing long distance running. And then as the body's breaking down, as age is catching up, I'm really playing a lot of golf. So instead of running, I'm walking the golf course. I'm a sports fanatic. So I go to all kinds of sporting events and, whether it's NFL games or college games or high school games, just always out in some sort of sports. I've never really gotten into fishing or anything like that. Maybe in retirement, I might do something like that. But just really taking advantage of quiet and simple times, and sometimes, like with our young people, they're always racing for that next thing. And like you said it earlier, like there's no substitute for experience. And so I'm okay with just sitting and just being still and not having to tinker in a whole bunch of different things. Now it only may be for an hour or so, but just sitting there and watching sports or watching the news or, listening to a book on tape or, reading something just really helps develop that other end of me that's outside of the superintendency and stuff. So I just believe in being well balanced, and I'm just thankful to be able to actually have a career where I'm able to impact and work with young people.
Yeah, you know what? It's interesting. We've had several guests on the Superintendent Hot Seat podcast now, and there's a theme emerging in my mind, and that theme is that for the really good superintendents that I've been fortunate enough to have as guests and be able to speak with, there is something that runs very deep in terms of service to the community, service to others. And I just think that's a beautiful thing, Adam, because it doesn't feel daunting like you described. It feels like an opportunity. Often I express it like this. People will ask me, well, you work with teenagers all day long. Aren't you worried about the future? I would say, no, it's actually quite the opposite. I'm actually very hopeful because there's some really bright kids coming along that have a level of social consciousness that I had not seen in the earlier stages in my career. We've got kids that really care deeply about the world and their local community and what's happening. And as a result, I'm very hopeful. And I'm guessing you have the same reaction.
Yeah, one thing we did here in Mount Diablo when I first got here, I'm not taking credit for it because it was already in motion before I got here, was we brought on a student board member, and to really be able to talk with this student and develop a close relationship with them for a year. I have them; they're on our board for a year. From different schools, different backgrounds, different goals and things like that. It really helps to hear like what their visions are, how they see things that we deal with at the superintendent level or at the board level. What is their interpretation of it? And it's so interesting how quick they pick up on our system. When they first start, they have no idea. Their eyes are huge and all this, but they pick up on the system so quick. And then I find our conversations kind of moving into different areas. Before, where it was very nuts and bolts, now it's getting into process and what is the end goal and why. How do you work with policy and with need and bring those things together? We really have some really in-depth conversations. And then it also allows me, because usually these are seniors, and so they're going through, the what am I going to do after high school and things like that. And just being able to talk to them about, what, if it's college, whatever school you get into and whatever school you go to, that's the school. And they just need to hear that, right? Because they get in their minds, I got to go here, or all my friends are going here, or my parents want me to go here, or I got this long dream that I was going to go to this school. And sometimes things don't work out. That's just life. And so being able to reassure them that, no, you're going to go where it is that, where you go is just where you are in life, and you're going to make the best of it. And if it doesn't work, you're going to find somewhere else. So with that in mind, yeah, I think our future is bright. Yeah, we have kids who, faces are in the phones, or, maybe if you pass by them, they don't have such an in-depth conversation. But if you have the opportunity to spend some time with them and really get to know them and earn their trust, then they'll start to open up, and then you can really get down to what they're thinking and what they believe in and things like that. And then you're like, oh my goodness, yeah, they got it figured out. They're going to be the ones to step in and take this. And, and just as I put a bow on this is what my goal is for students as they leave our organization. Is I want them, when they look back, to say, I had a positive experience. That's it, right?
That's right.
I mean, how many people, I hated school, or school was just torture for me, or, it was so hard, or it was this or whatever. Just if they look back on it and go, oh my goodness, it was positive. Elementary, middle, and high school, because I know that the adults that we have there, the experiences that we have set up for them, the instruction that we provide them, the extracurricular, if it's positive, and if they remember if they remember that experience positively, they are going to reap the benefits of what all of those things had to offer, right? And so sports is a great thing, right? Teamwork, dedication, commitment, hard work, all those things. If you had a positive experience on a team, then all those things are positive. If you hated going out there, if you were just yelled at, or if it was a terrible experience, then you're selling yourself short on all those things that sports builds. It's the same with being part of the drama or choir or on the robotics team or all those types of things. So I just want students to have a positive experience, and then they will take that positivity and put it out into the world and make this place better than what it currently is now.
Yeah, boy, so well said. Thank you, Adam. That's incredible. Very last question I have for you, although I think it might be hard to follow up on all that wisdom that you just laid out. It's just solid. I mean, it's spot on. What are you grateful for? What's on your gratitude list?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much. I mean, I am, I'm very grateful. I can answer that in many different ways. I'll just talk about Mount Diablo. First of all, we have a very responsive board. Many people don't know, like, the board sets the vision for the district, and then the superintendent's job really is to implement that vision. And we align. So all means all, right? We want all students to fill in the blank. And that for the board has been something, the relationship that we have, being a part of this governance team has really allowed me to, to push hard on the things that the board feels are important. And that is what this whole podcast has been about, that student experience. It's not about, it's not about them. It's not about highlighting their efforts or a pet project that they may have or the superintendent. It's like our students, how they are. So that allows me to go to my board and say, we are falling short in this area. But you know what? These are the things that we're going to do to address it. And I'm going to keep you updated on our progress. And sometimes we reach it and sometimes we don't. But together, we're doing that work. Or we got to do some real difficult things, as a board, again, with budget cuts and with, negotiations and things like that. But also at the end of the year, when we go through that graduation, we do 10 graduations together. So I have 5 comprehensive schools and 5 alternative types of graduations that we do. I'm able to stand with that board and we're able just to really appreciate the moment. And so with that, I'm so grateful, because what we are doing here in Mount Diablo is we are creating an organization of 55 schools, 29,000 students, 3,800 employees, where the students are at our center, not the adults, but the students are at our center. And I'm so grateful for that. But in life, I'm grateful to be here at 57 years old. I'm grateful for having a family. I'm grateful that my parents are still around. I'm grateful I got healthy kids, beautiful family at home, wife, everything. I'm just a happy person. And so hopefully that plays out in the work that I do and when I get opportunities to talk to individuals like yourself.
Yeah, it very much does. I mean, that happiness is infectious, and it paves the way for others, because whether we like it or not, as superintendents, everybody's paying attention to our every move and our every word we say. And when you're so deeply grounded in gratitude and just a happy person who has hope in their wheelhouse that, hey, things are going to be good. And kudos to your governance team, you and the whole governance team, for keeping kids first. We always like to say, when we keep kids first, everything else falls in line. Yeah. And that's really a truism in education. Adam, it's been a delight to have you on the podcast. We thank you for spending some time with us today and wish you much continued success.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the work that you're doing and, giving folks like myself a platform to be able to share our experiences. And hopefully there's someone out there who's listening where this can help provide a little bit of motivation or some strategic strategies that they need to be successful in all that they're doing. So thank you very much, Mike.